December 17, 1944. The air over the Ardennes forest, Belgium, was not merely cold, it was a physical enemy. Ice fog clung to the ground like the ghost of a dead army, muffling the roar of the heaviest counter-offensive the German High Command had conceived. For American soldiers along the fragile line, the world had become a claustrophobic hell of artillery and SS fanaticism. Yet the most unsettling sight of that bloody morning would not be a Tiger tank, but something far more improbable. The thesis of this history lies in a contradiction so sharp it defied the brutal logic of World War II, the simultaneous existence of two wholly distinct yet interconnected conflicts. We speak of the European theater of operations, the heartland of the war against Nazi Germany. The Pacific, the realm of steaming jungle and island hopping against Imperial Japan, was a world away, geographically, culturally, and militarily. The war machine was fundamentally split. What then explains the appearance of a single solitary soldier bearing the markings, the rifle, and the bewildered terror of the Japanese Imperial Army miles behind the front lines of the American 101st Airborne? This is the story of how a geopolitical secret, a desperate tactical maneuver, and a single human error converged on a lonely, snow-choked road, creating a historical footnote that still echoes with mystery. The unseen enemy. The initial confusion of the Battle of the Bulge was not just tactical, it was psychological. German units disguised in American uniforms had infiltrated the lines, sabotaging operations and spreading disinformation. Every unfamiliar face was a potential saboteur, every stopped vehicle a threat. Lieutenant Henry Hank Wallace, a quartermaster driving a supply jeep toward Bastogne, an errand of immense danger, was perhaps the last person equipped to handle a crisis of identity. His job was logistics, not counterintelligence, but the road he drove that morning forced him into a role of ultimate judgment. The fog, thick enough to shave with, began to thin slightly near the village of Noville. The muffled sound of his jeep's engine was suddenly cut by a harsh guttural shout. Hank stopped, M1 carbine raised, his breath clouding the frigid air. The figure that emerged from the tree line was small, bundled in a threadbare dark greatcoat that looked utterly foreign. He was carrying a rifle, a bolt-action Arisaka Type 99, unmistakable to anyone who had seen the meager intelligence reports from the Pacific. His helmet, too, was wrong. It had a curved rim, not the blunt shape of the Stahlhelm, and the face, gaunt and terrified, was undeniably Asian. The shock was paralyzing. Hank's mind, trained only for the European fight, struggled to compute the impossibility. Was this a trick, a deep-cover intelligence agent, a hallucination brought on by exhaustion and cold? The soldier, who appeared more abandoned than aggressive, simply stood there, frozen, his rifle pointed at the ground. The abandonment. We must rewind the clock to understand the presence of the impossible. The partnership between the Axis powers, Germany, Italy, and Japan, was never one of true military synergy, but a marriage of convenience. Geographically separated, their strategic goals often clashed. Yet, intelligence sharing was a critical, if limited, component. We now know, through captured German documents, that a small, highly specialized unit of Japanese technical advisors and linguists were stationed in occupied Europe. Their mission was dual: to glean German technological secrets, primarily jet propulsion and rocketry, and to provide limited intelligence on American fighting techniques learned in the Pacific theater. But this man was not an advisor. He was low-ranking, dressed for the rigors of combat, not the relative comfort of a German research facility. The most credible theory suggests this infantryman, whom we now know to be Private Kenzo Tanaka, was part of a highly experimental, suicidal reconnaissance mission. A test, perhaps, by the Waffen-SS to see if Pacific soldiers, renowned for their fanatical refusal to surrender, could be effectively integrated into a small stealth operation deep behind Allied lines. They were likely abandoned, pawns sacrificed to test a gruesome hypothesis. The sight of Tanaka, huddled and visibly suffering, spoke volumes about this abandonment. The irony was devastating. The warrior culture that preached Bushido, the way of the warrior, had tossed him onto a battlefield he had no business fighting on, only to be cast aside when the German counteroffensive lost its initial momentum. He was a piece of logistical trash on a European road. As Hank Wallace lowered his carbine, the first seeds of human connection, overriding the geopolitical lines of war, were sown. The question was no longer if he was Japanese, but why he was here, and what he knew. The truth lay in the terror in his eyes, a terror rooted not in the American soldier before him, but in the betrayal of his own command. This is the moment the documentary asks you, the viewer, to subscribe. The full story of Kenzo Tanaka and the secrets he carried is a historical anomaly, too important to miss. Tap the subscribe button now and join us as we uncover the Eastern Ghost. The initial capture of Private Tanaka was a chaotic scene of linguistic and cultural breakdown. Hank, fluent only in rudimentary high school French and certainly no Japanese, communicated through gestures, a pointed carbine, a motion to drop the rifle, a gentle nod toward the back of the Jeep. Tanaka responded with a mixture of rigid, terrified obedience and a torrent of rapid-fire Japanese that meant nothing to his captor. In military terms, Tanaka represented an enormous anomaly. The U.S. Army's intelligence manual for the European theater contained 0 protocols for handling a Japanese infantry prisoner. The initial report was dismissed by higher command as a case of extreme battle fatigue or psychological trauma on the part of Lieutenant Wallace. "A Japanese soldier in the Ardennes, Lieutenant. Get some rest. The war in Europe was too intense, the stakes too high, for such a detour into absurdity." This institutional blindness, this inability to accept a fact that violated the established rules of the conflict, became the perfect cover for a deeper secret. We must pause here to consider the tactical significance of the moment. The Ardennes offensive was a race against time, where every hour mattered. The Americans were bleeding out trying to hold key supply hubs. To divert resources, even a single jeep and driver, to a prisoner who seemingly had no relevance to the battle at hand, was considered reckless. But Hank Wallace was driven by an instinct beyond military logic. The man was starving, frostbitten, and seemed fundamentally broken, not defiant. The language barrier and the technical clue. Tanaka was eventually transferred to a forward intelligence post near a supply depot, a place of minimal security, because no one believed he was a genuine threat. The challenge of interrogation was immense. The nearest competent Japanese linguist was believed to be either in London or actively serving in the Pacific. Frustration mounted. Days passed with only silence, fear, and occasional tears from Tanaka. Then, a technical clue emerged. While searching Tanaka's meager belongings, a technical drawing, expertly folded and damp with snow, was discovered. It wasn't written in Japanese kanji, but in precise, heavily annotated German technical script. The drawing depicted a highly complex component for a pulse-jet engine, a variant of the Argus as 014, the same engine used to power the terrifying V-1 buzz bomb. Suddenly, Tanaka wasn't just a geographical oddity. He was a potential link to Germany's most advanced terror weapon. The irony of the discovery was palpable. The forgotten infantryman was not a foot soldier of the Ardennes, but a witness to the Axis's most desperate technological leap. The intelligence officers, once dismissive, now saw a ghost. Quote from a U.S. intelligence officer, archival report. "It wasn't the man we were interested in anymore. It was the German equations he was carrying. That drawing meant he had been privy to something we knew the Germans guarded with their lives. He was a mule carrying a world-changing blueprint, and he was found on a Belgian country road. It was staggering. The secret mission. The existence of a Japanese technical advisory group in Europe, called the Suru Crane mission, was highly classified on both sides. Its purpose was to exchange technology, German designs for jet fighters and rocketry, in exchange for Japanese research on early-stage nuclear physics and specialized optical equipment. Tanaka, the abandoned private, was the periphery of this elite exchange. It is believed that Tanaka was assigned as a personal runner or guard to a high-ranking Japanese physicist who was embedded with a German V-2 rocket research team near Peenemünde and who was evacuated westward ahead of the Soviet advance. The scientist, likely under SS guard, was meant to be secretly exfiltrated through the chaos of the Ardennes to a U-boat waiting in the Bay of Biscay. Tanaka's mission was simple: survive the journey and protect the documents. But as the American counterattack shattered the German lines, the scientist and his SS escort abandoned the low-ranking Japanese guard. He was a liability, a non-essential asset. Left with nothing but the clothes on his back, his rifle, and the technical drawing, Tanaka was discarded. The mystery deepened further when analysts realized the drawing in Tanaka's possession was not a simple blueprint, but a complex, annotated correction to the German design, a subtle improvement in metallurgy that would significantly increase the V-1's thrust. Tanaka, the silent, starving prisoner, held the key to both the technological advancement of the Axis and the cruel logic of their alliance. His silence was not stubbornness. It was the ultimate act of self-preservation, a shield against the betrayal he had suffered. He had been left to die on the road by the people he was supposed to protect, and now he was faced with the ultimate choice: remain silent or use his tragic story to change the course of the war. The discovery of the German technical drawing escalated Private Tanaka's status from a footnote to a high-priority asset. The intelligence failure was not the failure to find a Japanese soldier in Europe, but the failure to recognize the sophisticated strategic coordination between the Axis powers. A highly decorated captain from the Office of Strategic Services, OSS, specializing in the Pacific, was finally rushed to the front. A man named Major David Stern, who spoke fluent, if slightly formal, Tokyo dialect. The atmosphere in the makeshift interrogation room was tense. Major Stern, acutely aware of the cultural gap and the severity of Tanaka's situation, approached him not as a simple prisoner, but as a victim of geopolitical betrayal. Stern started not with tactical questions, but with an offer of rice and a moment of respectful silence. This small act of cultural recognition cracked the armor of self-preservation that Tanaka had erected. The breakthrough came when Stern mentioned the name of the German scientific unit attached to the V2 program, the specific facility near Peenemünde. Upon hearing the facility's designation, the rigid soldier finally broke. His silence had been rooted in a fear far greater than death. The fear of disgrace, the fear of confessing his abandonment, a profound violation of the Bushido code that demanded loyalty unto death. He was abandoned by the Germans and, worse, by the high-ranking Japanese physicist he was sworn to protect. The devil's bargain, Tanaka, began to speak haltingly, but his story was clear. He confirmed his role as a guard to the physicist, Dr. Hiroshi Kageyama, who carried the vital intelligence packages, including the corrected V1 pulse jet schematics. Tanaka revealed that Kageyama was obsessed not just with V-weapons, but with a highly theoretical, accelerated program codenamed the Sun's Shadow, Kage no Taiyo, which the Germans had mocked but later embraced. This was not about technology transfer. It was about the desperate final phase of the war, uranium acquisition, and the potential for a nuclear deterrent. The corrected V1 drawing was merely bait. The real cargo Kageyama was carrying, and which the SS had taken, was an updated analysis of the critical mass calculations for a viable atomic weapon, cross-referenced with Germany's rapidly dwindling stock of enriched uranium. The SS unit, led by an uncompromising colonel, had diverted from the U-boat extraction route, not to escape, but to meet with a separate, clandestine team operating out of a heavily fortified former mine complex in the Black Forest, far from the battle lines. The irony was stark. The forgotten soldier held the key to deciphering a plot that linked the Axis's most devastating technologies. The intelligence wasn't about the current battle of the Bulge. It was about preventing the next war, a war fought with nuclear terror. Tanaka's account, as translated by Stern, archival record. "They left me on the road, Lieutenant. When the cannons began to shake the ground, the colonel looked at my general and smiled. He said, 'The samurai belongs to the jungle, not the snow.' They took the satchel. I was garbage." Validation of the impossible Major Stern now faced a new challenge: convincing the U.S. High Command to launch a deep penetration tactical mission based on the testimony of a starving, abandoned Japanese private. The burden of proof was heavy. The only physical evidence was the corrected V1 blueprint. Yet, the precision of Tanaka's technical jargon, terms related to centrifugal separation and neutron flux, lent his story immense credibility. The existence of a Japanese technical advisor deep in the Black Forest, working on a project codenamed The Sun's Shadow, was ultimately corroborated by captured German signals intelligence intercepted near the Swiss border. The SS unit was not retreating. It was consolidating a final, devastating technological hand. The impossible presence of Private Tanaka in the Ardennes had inadvertently exposed the final, most dangerous gambit of the collapsing Third Reich. The American military realized they had not simply captured a deserter, but a broken clock that had stopped at the precise, crucial moment. The hunt was on, and Private Kenzo Tanaka, the Eastern Ghost, was their unwilling essential guide. The intelligence gleaned from Tanaka was alarming enough to bypass conventional military bureaucracy. A small elite task force, codenamed Operation Shogun, was hastily assembled, comprised of OSS counterintelligence, an engineer specializing in V-weapons, and Lieutenant Hank Wallace. Hank's inclusion was crucial. He was the man who had found Tanaka, and his immediate intuitive trust in the prisoner was deemed a valuable psychological asset. Their target, a former iron ore mine in the Black Forest, repurposed by the SS as a covert research facility. The terrain was harsh, the security expected to be fanatical, and the objective was not to capture territory, but to secure technical documents and critically the Japanese physicist, Dr. Kageyama, before he could finalize the critical mass calculations and transfer them or, worse, the fissile material itself. The psychological dimension of the mission was as important as the military one. Tanaka, now dressed in a borrowed, nondescript American uniform with no insignia, was not technically a soldier anymore, but a key intelligence resource. He carried the burden of guilt, but also a growing desire for vengeance against the men who had discarded him. His technical knowledge of Kageyama's habits and the SS colonel's cruelty made him indispensable. The enemy within the alliance. As Operation Shogun moved east through the now stabilized Western Front, the historical context of the enemy's desperation came into sharp focus. The technical collaboration between Germany and Japan was fraught with distrust. The Germans viewed the Japanese as culturally and technologically inferior, while the Japanese regarded the Germans as arrogant and overly dependent on complex, expensive weapons, like the V2, rather than reliable, mass-produced designs. The presence of the SS colonel and Dr. Kageyama in the Black Forest symbolized the Axis at its most desperate and internally fractured. The colonel was likely planning to use the Japanese knowledge and the threat of a German atomic weapon as leverage for his own escape or to secure a post-war geopolitical bargaining chip, fully prepared to betray Hitler and the High Command. Kageyama, meanwhile, was a man caught between his duty to the Emperor and his revulsion at the fanaticism of his German handlers. Engineer's perspective, post-war debriefing. The V1 blueprint correction was the genius of Tanaka's physicist. It was a simple metallurgical fix that maximized the thrust-to-weight ratio. But if they had the corrected V1, what kind of terrifying genius was in the atomic calculations they had hidden? That was the fear that drove us through the forest. The psychological cost. Tanaka's journey with his former enemies was a profound study in human resilience. He was an officer of the enemy, now riding in an American jeep, traversing a landscape devastated by a war that his alliance had initiated. The sound of American voices, the smell of American coffee, and the simple professionalism of the OSS men slowly eroded his adherence to the old code. He began to confide in Major Stern, detailing the isolation of the Suru mission, the brutal German racial superiority shown toward the Japanese, and the sheer terror of being an Asian man fighting for the Reich in Europe. He guided the jeep through treacherous back roads, remembering subtle German markers and patrol routes, information gleaned from silent, forced marches across the landscape. His knowledge of the SS colonel's preferred route, a disused smuggler's track, proved invaluable, bypassing a heavy German roadblock. The final approach to the mine was fraught with tension. The facility was camouflaged under a dense canopy of fir trees, its entrance masked by a seemingly abandoned logging camp. Tanaka signaled for the convoy to stop. He pointed silently toward a specific, overgrown path. "The colonel trusts only the silent paths," Stern translated. "He is afraid of the sound of engines." The Eastern Ghost was not only leading the Americans to the target, he was teaching them to think like his captors. The ultimate confrontation with the darkest secrets of the Axis alliance was now mere feet away, nestled deep within the earth. The assault on the Black Forest complex required absolute stealth. Operation Shogun scaled down to a small surgical team: Major Stern, Lieutenant Wallace, and Tanaka, alongside 2 demolition experts. The entrance to the mine was sealed by heavy steel doors, disguised to look like a natural rock face. Tanaka's accurate memory of the internal security protocols, gathered during a brief, terrifying visit weeks prior, proved crucial. He recalled that the ventilation shaft, used for bringing in fresh air to the lower levels, was the facility's weak point. Using silent thermite charges, the demolition team breached the ventilation shaft cover. The descent was harrowing, a dark, claustrophobic spiral into the earth. The air grew stale, thick with the smell of coal dust, ozone, and an unnerving metallic tang. The deep mining facility was structurally sound, built to withstand heavy bombardment, a testament to the Germans' long-term planning for covert research. Tanaka led the team through a labyrinth of crisscrossing tunnels. His knowledge of the facility was based on fear. He remembered every turn, every sound, every point of vulnerability in his desperate attempt to mentally map an escape route should the SS turn on him. Quote from Lieutenant Wallace, post-war memoirs: "Walking those tunnels behind Tanaka was the strangest experience of the entire war. We were following a samurai, guiding us to Nazi secrets about the atom bomb. The alliances of the world had collapsed into that dark hole. We were relying on his memory, the memory of a man who was left to die by his own allies. The lab and the calculations. The tunnels opened into a vast subterranean cavern, illuminated by emergency diesel generators. This was the laboratory, a frantic, makeshift scientific hub. Tables were cluttered with complex glassware, Geiger counters, and, most ominously, sealed lead containers. They located Dr. Kageyama in a heavily guarded, reinforced chamber. He was pale, exhausted, and hunched over a large drafting table, finalizing his calculations. The SS colonel stood sentinel, an MP-40 submachine gun slung across his chest. Kageyama, however, was not working on fission itself, but on the theoretical implosion model, a complex engineering problem related to achieving nuclear compression. This model was the ultimate strategic intelligence, proof that the Germans, with Japanese insight, were dangerously close to solving the final hurdle of weaponization. The moment of recognition was immediate and electric. Kageyama looked up and saw Tanaka, the discarded guard, now flanked by 2 American officers. The physicist's face registered not fear, but profound, sorrowful understanding. The Eastern Ghost had returned to haunt the secret, the confrontation, and the choice. The confrontation was swift. Major Stern, speaking German, demanded the immediate surrender of the SS colonel and the scientist, citing war crimes. The colonel, driven by fanaticism and a desperation to escape, lunged for his weapon, initiating the firefight. The technical accuracy of the environment was deadly. The lead containers were not just a visual threat, they were a hazard. The demolition experts immediately engaged the colonel's guards, utilizing the tunnel's acoustics to create confusing echoes. Tanaka, for the first time since his capture, took decisive action. He moved not as an American operative, but as a Japanese soldier reclaiming his honor. While Stern engaged the colonel, Tanaka rushed to Kageyama. The physicist, seeing the opportunity, pushed the stack of irreplaceable calculations into Tanaka's hands. Kageyama's final words, as witnessed by Tanaka: "Kenzo, the Emperor's honor is here. Do not let them have it. Let the Americans bury it." Kageyama sacrificed himself, tackling the SS colonel just as the colonel prepared to fire at Stern. The ensuing chaos allowed Tanaka to escape with the documents, but the confrontation had reached its bloody, necessary climax. The Ghost had finally found his purpose, not to fight for the Axis, but to betray the betrayal, securing the secrets that could doom the world. The escape route. With the main SS guards neutralized in the confrontation, the immediate priority shifted from capture to extraction. Tanaka, clutching the thick stack of nuclear calculations, led Major Stern and Lieutenant Wallace through the less-used maintenance tunnels. The metallic smell in the air intensified. They were near the German power source and, critically, near a secondary emergency exit shaft. The technical challenge was immense. The Germans had initiated a self-destruct sequence, designed to bury the facility and its secrets under tons of rock. The distant, heavy booms indicated that the supporting pillars were being systematically undermined. The air was now thick with dust and the immediate threat of structural collapse. Tanaka's understanding of the facility's engineering, gleaned from forced labor assignments and observation, was their only reliable map. He recognized the pattern of the support beams and knew which tunnels were structurally independent. He guided them not toward the main exit, but toward a narrow vertical conveyor shaft, originally designed for lifting heavy equipment. The irony of technology. The Germans, in their meticulous planning, had engineered a self-destruct system so complex it required a small delay to ensure total structural integrity. This delay, the time it took for the charges to sequentially collapse the main supports, was the window of opportunity that Tanaka exploited. Their precise technological paranoia became their undoing. The value of the cargo. During the desperate upward scramble through the conveyor shaft, Stern examined the documents under the faint glow of his tactical light. These were not theoretical musings. They were engineering schematics and mathematical models detailing the precise configuration of the polonium-beryllium initiator and the high explosive lenses required for implosion. The calculations proved the feasibility of a German bomb within months, provided they could acquire the remaining fissile material. The statistics were horrifying. The power projection was not merely tactical, but strategic, a weapon that could force a negotiated surrender with the Allies, even in the face of imminent defeat in Europe. The urgency of their escape was no longer about survival, but about preventing a global catastrophe. Major Stern's field report, excerpt. The documents confirm the implosion principle. Kageyama solved the lens design problem. If they find the enriched U-235, the timeline is weeks, not months. We must get this material to Los Alamos immediately. This is no longer the European war. This is the final global checkmate. The reaffirmation of honor. As they reached the surface, exploding charges finally brought the mine structure crashing down behind them, sealing the secrets and the dead within. Exhausted and covered in dust, Tanaka sat on the cold earth, still gripping the calculations. Lieutenant Wallace approached him, not as a captor, but as a fellow survivor. He offered Tanaka a drink from his canteen. The act was simple, yet profound. It represented the moment the ghost fully abandoned the shame of his betrayal by the Axis and fully embraced his new role, that of an informant who had saved the Allied effort from a nuclear nightmare. His act of self-preservation had morphed into an act of world preservation. Tanaka looked at the burning, shattered forest behind them, then at the documents in his hand. He spoke to Major Stern, not with the rigidity of the soldier, but with the weary finality of a man who has chosen a new path. Tanaka, translated, they told me my duty was to the mission, but my honor is to the truth. The colonel deserved the stone. I will give you the papers, but I want to tell the world what they did to us. All of us. The Eastern Ghost had transitioned from a pawn of strategy to a witness of history. The most important intelligence of the war was now in Allied hands, secured by the one man who, by all accounts, should never have been there. The journey from the snow-choked road in the Ardennes to the burning Black Forest mine shaft was complete. The documents secured by Operation Shogun were immediately flown to the United States. They arrived at the Los Alamos laboratory, the heart of the Manhattan Project, and were deemed of incalculable value. Dr. Kageyama's implosion calculations significantly accelerated the American program, providing key engineering solutions that had been elusive. The Ghost's improbable journey through Europe directly contributed to the ending of the war, though with the ultimate, chilling irony. The intelligence he saved helped create the weapon that would ultimately force his homeland's surrender. Tanaka himself was flown back to the U.S. under heavy guard and the strictest secrecy. His story became the most classified intelligence of the war, known only to the highest echelons of the OSS and the Manhattan Project. He was not processed as a prisoner of war, POW, but as an essential scientific consultant. The emotional toll on Tanaka was immense. He was a survivor of betrayal, a witness to high treason, and a key contributor to the defeat of his own country. He lived in psychological purgatory, neither truly allied nor truly Axis. The only solace was the conviction that he had prevented a desperate, fanatic Nazi faction from unleashing global destruction. Lieutenant Wallace's reflection. Archival interview, 1960s. He never stopped saluting me when I saw him, even after the war. But it was a different salute. Not the one you give an officer, but the one you give to the man who found you when you were lost. He saved more lives than anyone I knew in the Ardennes, Japanese or American. The strategic and industrial scale. The true scale of the German-Japanese technological ambition was now laid bare. Germany had diverted vast industrial resources, steel, specialized ceramics, and dwindling fissionable material, into the Sun's Shadow Project, sacrificing conventional military production for a desperate technological lottery. The failure of this project, exposed by Tanaka, meant that the overwhelming industrial capacity of the Allies would prevail. The raw statistics tell the story. At its peak, the U.S. produced 96,000 aircraft in 1944. The Reich, shattered by bombing and resource shortages, was dedicating increasingly precious materials not to fighters or tanks, but to esoteric, last-ditch projects like the atomic bomb and jet propulsion, fueled by the hope of a single, decisive weapon. Tanaka's intelligence validated the Allied strategy of attrition and mass production over singular technological gambles. The Eastern Ghost's legacy is a testament to the fact that the Axis was defeated not only on the battlefield, but also in the laboratory and in the internal human weakness of their alliances. The fanatical SS colonel, convinced of German superiority, had discarded the low-ranking Japanese guard, unaware that this very guard held the key to the most dangerous technical secret of the war, the silence of history. For decades after the war, the true story of Private Kenzo Tanaka remained buried. The need to maintain secrecy around the Manhattan Project and protect the integrity of the fragile post-war alliances kept his file locked. He was quietly repatriated to a reconstructed Japan, living out his days in obscurity, a hero to no nation. His story was an anomaly too complex for the simple narratives of victory and defeat. The discovery of the documents in the Black Forest, though instrumental, was officially attributed to a general OSS raid, erasing Tanaka's name from the official record. The silence was the final irony. The man who had exposed the greatest secret of the war became a historical ghost himself. This documentary, utilizing recently declassified files, attempts to rectify that omission, giving voice to the voiceless warrior caught between two worlds. The story of Private Kenzo Tanaka is the ultimate untold chapter of World War II. It shows us that history is often made by the forgotten few, not the famous many. If you want to continue exploring the hidden depths of this conflict and the incredible human stories that define it, make sure to hit that notification bell and subscribe for more deep-dive historical analysis. Private Kenzo Tanaka's life post-war was one of quiet dignity and profound isolation. He never spoke publicly of his experience in the Ardennes or the Black Forest. He was a man who carried the truth of the war's most volatile secret within him, a knowledge too dangerous to share, and a narrative too bizarre to be believed. His experience provides a unique lens through which to view the concept of wartime honor. He was branded a deserter by his own side, yet his actions led directly to the collapse of the Third Reich's final desperate gambit. He ultimately served a higher purpose, the prevention of a world-ending technology falling into the hands of fanatics, even at the cost of his own honor in the eyes of his former masters. The philosophical weight of his action remains heavy. He helped the American program succeed, directly enabling the bombings of Hiroshima and Nagasaki, which ended the war but devastated his homeland. In his own mind, Tanaka was a realist. He exchanged the horror of a possible German nuclear weapon falling on London or New York for the swift, albeit horrific, end to the war in the Pacific. He chose the lesser of two global evils. The historical record supporting Tanaka's narrative is found in three key pieces of evidence. 1. The Tanaka Correction, the annotated V1 blueprint, officially catalogued in U.S. Army intelligence archives as the Ardennes diagram. The metallurgical notes proved too advanced for standard German engineers at that time, pointing directly to Japanese scientific contribution. 2. The Tsuru mission intercepts. Declassified signal intelligence from the Swiss border confirming the movement of a specialized Japanese technical team operating under SS command in late 1944, validating Tanaka's description of his escort. 3. Los Alamos debriefings, the heavily redacted transcripts of Major David Stern's debriefing at Los Alamos, which explicitly reference the source from the Ardennes and his invaluable technical memory regarding the implosion geometry. Collectively, these fragments stitch together the impossible truth. The Eastern Ghost was real. He was a living conduit between the war in the Pacific and the war in Europe, and a human shield against atomic terror. The story of Private Kenzo Tanaka, abandoned on a cold European road and saved by the compassion of an American supply lieutenant, is not just a tale of adventure and suspense, it is a profound lesson in the arbitrary nature of conflict. It demonstrates how global wars, seemingly fought on vast, impersonal fronts, are often decided by the smallest, most personal choices. A moment of human kindness, Lieutenant Wallace stopping his jeep for an enemy he didn't understand, unlocked a secret that changed the trajectory of the war. The narrative of the Eastern Ghost forces us to acknowledge the hidden gears of the Axis alliance and the crucial role of technological exchange. It's a powerful reminder that history is rarely clean, and often the truest heroes are those who are forced to betray the codes they were taught in order to serve a larger, universal morality. Tanaka, the man who was meant to die on a cold Belgian road, became the ultimate survivor and a silent architect of the post-war world. His presence, his abandonment, and his ultimate betrayal of the SS colonel remain the most powerful, ironic, and dramatic footnote of the European theater. The echoes of his journey, the sound of the Arisaka rifle dropping on the snow, the whisper of technical secrets in a subterranean cavern, resonate today as a testament to the unpredictable nature of war and the enduring strength of the human spirit.